It began with a handshake initiated by the vice president, who then took the lead in attacking former President Trump's record and fitness for office. Trump swung back hard, but even Republicans say he missed opportunities to land knockouts on issues like inflation and her changes in policy positions. The larger question now, what kind of an impact will this have on a deadlocked race?
Now, this is Talking Points on CBS News Minnesota.
Good evening and welcome to Talking Points. I'm Esme Murphy. With polls showing the race statistically tied nationally and in key battleground states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, the debate stakes were high for both candidates. Many analysts, including Republicans, are giving Harris the debate win. Even South Carolina's conservative Senator Lindsey Graham called the debate a disaster and a missed opportunity for Trump. One clear win for Harris came after the debate, when Taylor Swift wrote to her 283 million Instagram followers that she was endorsing Harris. Swift posed with a cat and signed off as, quote, a childless cat lady. As early voting in many states starts in just days, what will the impact of the showdown and a mega superstar's endorsement have? Tonight, we'll ask our experts, Humphrey School Professor Larry Jacobs, and our analyst, Democrat Abou Amara, and Republican Amy Koch. Well, joining us right now is Larry Jacobs of the Humphrey School. Professor Larry Jacobs, your thoughts on the debate?
Well, it was a big night, and I have to say I was surprised by how well Kamala Harris did. She was able to reverse the field. She is the incumbent. They've been in power with Joe Biden for 4 years almost, and she was able to put Donald Trump in the position of defending his record, where she portrayed herself as part of a new generation, ready to turn the page, talked about issues where she was going to bring about real change in abortion and economic opportunity and national security. And Donald Trump was there defending, his treatment during the Russian investigation and the size of his rallies. It was a real missed opportunity for him, because he probably wins if they focus on the issues of the economy and inflation and immigration, where it just shows a large number of Americans favor him over Kamala Harris, but he didn't get to it as much as he needed to.
I want to ask you about a question on the economy that came up very early. She was asked, by the moderator, can you tell people that if they're better off than they were 4 years ago, which of course came up in other debates. It's a very famous line. It's a very yes or no question. And she completely dodged it and then danced around it. And then when they went to Trump, instead of the former president going in for the kill, he just kind of skirted around it too. I mean, I was expecting him to really come back and just focus on that issue, which is by all accounts the biggest issue in the race. What did you think of that moment?
That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The moderators were doing a favor to Donald Trump in making Kamala Harris come to terms with a record that is unpopular. Polls show that there's just a lot of frustration with where the economy is, a sense that the country is off on the wrong track, and that Donald Trump is better able to handle the economy and inflation. And he missed the pitch. He was just so distracted, so much on the defensive, that he wasn't able to seize what was a give me.
Yeah, it was one, and it is such an important issue. Polls show it's the top issue for the economy. Let me ask you about Kamala Harris, the vice president, dodged a number of questions, but she also did a few things where she seemed like she was kind of baiting the former president. Perhaps nowhere more so than when she invited the audience to go to a Trump rally where people start leaving after the first hour, because they tend to go about 2 hours. And that does happen. I've been to a number of Trump rallies. What did you think of that moment? I mean, did he seem to fall for her efforts to reel him in?
Yeah, I mean, the theme here is that Kamala Harris went in with a strategy to put Donald Trump on the defensive, to make her case that she's the candidate of change, which is odd because she's the incumbent, and to knock Donald Trump off of his stride. That is a great example. What is he doing talking about his rallies? A disciplined candidate would have just stuck to the issues, particularly the economy and inflation and immigration, and he couldn't do it. I think there are a lot of Republicans who support Donald Trump today who think he left a lot on the field, that he just didn't take the advantages that were given to him and that were out there.
This is the big question. Will the debate have more of an impact than Taylor Swift's endorsement of Kamala Harris that came right after the debate?
Well, there was a Snap poll, which has uncertain reliability, that showed Kamala Harris winning by more than 20 points.
Winning the debate by 20 points. There have been a number of surveys, and all the ones that I have seen do err on that, do give it to her.
Right. Right. So there was a Snap poll that showed Kamala Harris winning the debate by about 20 points, but it's uncertain whether that's really going to hold up in the coming weeks. But the endorsement last night by Taylor Swift, that might have an impact. And the reason is one of the weaknesses for Kamala Harris is that younger voters who supported Joe Biden in 2020 have not rallied to Kamala Harris at this point. So with Taylor Swift's following among young people, that may actually trigger some support. She's got good support and following, obviously, all over the country.
283 million followers on Instagram alone.
Right. And so the race is going to come down to a few states. In 2020, the race was decided by 21,000 votes in 3 states. And that's out of 155 million total votes cast. So that kind of impact by Taylor Swift, particularly if she follows it up, particularly if she makes this a theme, could have an impact. Again, it might not be huge, but you don't need huge at this point. You need tilts.
All right. Well, listen, Larry Jacobs, thank you so much for your time and your analysis.
Good to be with you.
Well, joining us right now, Republican analyst Amy Koch, Democratic analyst Abou Amara. All right, folks, the debate. I'll start with Amy. How did both candidates do?
So I think that there were some wins for both of them and some misses for both of them. I think you can score a win for Trump on the economy and on foreign policy. I think that you score a win for the vice president on sort of domestic health care, questions of that, and women's the reproductive health question. And I think one that should have been a hit for Donald Trump, immigration, should have been a home run for him. He did get distracted and was kind of baited into discussing his rallies instead of like pushing back really hard on that failure by the Biden administration.
And then he digressed into a false allegation of
that was also where he went to the cats and dogs and eating the cats and dogs.
Eating cats and dogs, which is the thing everybody's talking about.
Yeah, I think he just blew the question on immigration.
Because that's a big deal, and a lot of people are very concerned about it. Abou, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we saw the best of Kamala Harris, and I think we saw what we know to be the worst of Donald Trump. With Donald Trump, he's someone who can't control himself. He spins off and talks about odd things, right? Electrocuting sharks or Hannibal Lecter, and here we talked about eating dogs or animals. I think when you contrast that with Kamala Harris and the vision she was showing, someone who was very presidential, who was calm, cool, and collected, I think clearly the American people are going to see that she won the debate. How it moves voters, I think that's a different question.
All right, well, let me ask you about one point early on in the debate when there was a very simple question that's played a role in a lot of debates. David Muir asked, are you better, or can you tell the nation that they're better off today than they were 4 years ago when you and President Biden were elected? She did not answer that question. I thought that was a weak spot for her.
Well, here's what I think that was. That was acknowledging that we're still going through some serious issues, right? I mean, inflation is still something that people are feeling. So you don't want a politician to tell you everything is rosy, but here are the facts. 4 years ago, we were coming out of a global pandemic. People weren't able to go to the grocery store like they were to, or take their kids to school.
But stuff is still more expensive.
There's no question. And that's why she didn't answer the question in the way that I think, and pivoted to talk about what she's going to do moving forward.
That was by far one of her weakest moments. I thought also on foreign policy, he wiped the floor with her on foreign policy. She didn't have good answers. And frankly, you do get to tie her to Biden. At one point she said, I'm not Biden. But yes, but you have been a part of that administration for 4 years. You don't get to separate yourself. What this economy is Biden's economy. The foreign policy that's been going on, whether it's Israel, Ukraine, all of that, Afghanistan, the disastrous pull of Afghanistan, that's a fair hit for the former president to make. That is owned by Biden Harris.
You know, one of the polls that I thought was so interesting going into this debate was the New York Times poll that showed that 28% of people wanted to know more about Kamala Harris. In other words, they didn't know much about her, whereas only 9% want to know more about Donald Trump. That obviously suggests that a third of the nation really doesn't know much about her, even though she's been vice president for 3.5 years. What do you think about that? And did she get her message across? I'm assuming that millions of people watch that.
So actually, that's a really important and good number for her. What that says is the American people do not associate some of the aspects of the Biden administration with her. They want to hear what her ideas are. When you're voting for a top of the ticket, you're voting for the top of the ticket. You're not voting for who's the number two. And so it provides her an opportunity to sell a vision for America that is in her own right and not tied to Joe Biden. And so with that context, I think she did a good job of taking a first step of laying out a vision that was in stark contrast with Donald Trump.
What about the issue of abortion? I thought that was really a weak point for Trump when he went off on, in Minnesota, they execute babies after 9 months, which is not true. It doesn't happen anywhere.
You know, he could have talked about like the extreme policies that allow through the 9th month and left it there, and instead he didn't. You know, I think this is going to be interesting because we know that Vice President Harris is like hemorrhaging men in polling, right? She is just really struggling, and that's going to affect in a lot of states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. But I also think about if the Trump campaign needs to keep an eye on women and find better answers for these questions. He did do well with the IVF question and turned that around. But you don't want what happened 2 years ago, where there was just sort of this quiet vote of women going to the polls and saying, we're voting this way. Tonight we had a very famous endorsement for the Harris Walls ticket of Taylor Swift.
Well, let's right moments after. Well, it was I guess about maybe a half hour shortly after the debate. Taylor Swift comes out with a post on her Instagram with her umpteen million followers. It's got to be. She's one of the most followed people on Instagram, giving a very sort of thorough saying, just watched the debate and going through all these points about why she was endorsing Kamala Harris. Clearly not written spur of the moment, sitting there in her home at 10:30 with Travis Kelce. I mean,
she's an amazing writer, but
she's an amazing writer. I mean, obviously coordinated with the campaign. How much does that help?
There's no question. You know, in politics, endorsements rarely matter, right? It's a squabble between politicians often. This is the type of endorsement that can transcend politics. There are people all over the globe who know who Taylor Swift is. There are millions of people who may not participate in politics, but they know who Taylor Swift is. And if Taylor Swift is saying, I'm doing this, they want to be a part of it as well. It creates a unique opportunity.
Okay. All right. You get your chance to talk about the impact of the Taylor Swift endorsement on Kamala Harris. What does that do to her campaign? I mean, do you think Republicans are nervous right now?
Well, they should be paying attention to it. Anybody who went to the Eras, any of the concerts, I went to the Minneapolis tour here when she was here, and what Republicans do not want to miss on is women in this vote. We missed it. In 2022, we disregarded it. We did, and so many people did. We thought, the Republicans were going to be winning in a big way in 2022, and it was a quiet vote by women that went out there and voted against Republicans. So Republicans should not fall back on that. And so don't dismiss a Taylor Swift endorsement. It is a big thing, and it should be addressed.
You know, well, let me ask you about the quiet vote.
Yeah.
Is it the situation that there are Republican-leaning women out there, or Republican women who simply don't want to go out and say, this is crossed the line for me. I'm going to have to vote because of the abortion issue. I'm going to have to vote Democratic.
It's kind of all of it, right? It's talking about how there was a comments in the governor's race here about how a culture of abortion and women are going out dressing a certain way and getting jobs. Or it's J.D. Vance's comments about childless cat ladies. Taylor signed her Instagram a childless cat lady.
I missed that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's those kind of comments by clueless dudes that are clueless Republican dudes that are driving women away from this party. Even conservative Republican women. We are out there. We are working. We have amazing careers. We are not interested in what you have to say about we should be back in the kitchen or whatever, like things you're implying, or that our point is to only have children. I'm very proud of my daughter and I'm very proud of my career, and you can have both. Right. And that's Republican, Democrat, independent women.
And you can be proud of your cat.
You darn right. Or your dog.
Or your dog.
Don't snack on them.
Abou, in terms of, the former president might be hemorrhaging women. Sounds like Kamala Harris has a bit of a male problem. There was a fascinating issue or article in the New York Times that focused on the fact that she does not get the same amount of black male support that Joe Biden did. Yeah. What is with that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of complicating factors going into that. I will say 2 points. The first is, if you look historically, Democrats underperform with men, period. So that's just true across the board, whether it's Joe Biden, whether it's Barack Obama, whether it's Kamala Harris.
But if you rank Joe Biden, this article looked at Joe Biden's support amongst black men and Kamala Harris's support amongst black men, and she was quite a bit lower. I think 13 points lower.
That's true, and so part of the calculation here, I think, is there's been a lack of engagement. She's had a campaign for 50-something days.
Right.
A lot of folks don't know her, and when they do know, the limited things they do know about her tend to relate to her race in 2020. And some of the issues that were litigated in that case kind of turn off certain middle-aged men. And so I think there's work to do in that space. Again, she's not going to win this demographic, but the margins matter. If she can get her numbers up to 40%.
Do you think she can?
I think there's still time. And remember, she's sitting on a war chest of nearly $500 million. There's going to be money spent, millions of dollars every single day, persuading these voters. And I think there's an opportunity to close that gap.
But I didn't see an effort tonight. In the areas that I think matter for these folks, which are, for the guys, which are economy, which are foreign policy, which are also just like her leadership
Trump's
ability.
Strong points, I thought, in that
his
debate.
strong points were her downfall, and that's going to impact, particularly in the swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and frankly, Georgia, North Carolina, all the places that she's hoping to expand the map.
All right. Let's talk about early voting, because this starts within days, really all over the country, including Minnesota, September 20th. What is the impact of that? Because it seems like more states are jumping on board. Does that sort of eliminate the possibility of an October surprise?
So I think it reduces the impact of an October surprise. If you're banking votes every single day.
And what could that surprise be?
Who knows at this point? This is the most surprising election in a lifetime. Yeah. So I think it minimizes the impact. And this is where I think state parties come into play. This is a very unsexy thing to talk about in politics, but it matters. When you're trying to bank tens of thousands of votes every single day in these swing states, the infrastructure you have in these states matters. And the Democrats have a structural advantage when it comes to state parties, from Minnesota all the way to Pennsylvania. That could be the difference, because we're going to be winning on Election Day. The question is, do we win when all the votes are counted?
I think the Republicans have finally wised up that people want to vote early. People are wanting to vote absentee. People are wanting to do mail-in balloting. It was a huge issue in 2020 and in 2022, where Republicans were sort of saying all these things, so much fraud, where they were scaring their people away from voting in a way that consumers and voters are choosing to vote. And so now you see Republicans, I think, really in a smart way, realizing, okay, this is the new, since COVID, this is a new way that people are going to choose to vote. It's sort of like Zooms or telemedicine, right? We've moved on. COVID changed things. And Republicans are coming around to accept that, because you just hurt yourself when you're bad-mouthing or bashing different ways that people really are choosing to vote.
Well, Abou Amara, Amy Koch, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate your time. And that does it for this edition of Talking Points. As always, please email me with comments or suggestions at esme@cbs.com. The show streams on our always free streaming service on CBS News Minnesota every Wednesday and Thursday night at 6:30 and 9:30 p.m. On Friday, the show posts to YouTube for on-demand viewing. Thanks for watching. I'm Esme Murphy, WCCO News.